That movie guy. Okay.
Hi everyone, welcome back and welcome for the very first time. This is a new video to my channel series and it is actually called What I Saw At. And these are going to be videos dedicated to the film festivals I'm covering as press or even as a general member of the public. I cover a lot of film festivals for the website I work for, moviemarket.co.uk, and obviously the videos come on this channel also. And first of all, I would like to discuss the films I saw at Glasgow Film Festival. This was a festival that I was very lucky enough to get accreditation for, and I've seen a lot of interesting and very diverse pieces of cinema. So that's enough talking, let's get to the films I saw. Next up is The Swordsman from director Choi Jae-hoon. This is a South Korean film that really was quite interesting within its ideas, but it never fully grabbed me. To be honest with you, I thought it was an interesting journey that never really sunk its teeth. But I know a lot of people within my channel, within the community that I'm in, within film, will really dig this film. And Eric from the Asian Movie Enthusiast gave a very good review of this, and I'll leave a link up here somewhere so you can see it. But honestly, keep it on your radar. It's a film I definitely really need to reconsider again. I don't know if I was just suffering from fatigue and it just didn't really sync with me, but might be for you. Next up is The Toll from Ryan Andrew Hooper. This is actually a Welsh film that is a comedy spaghetti western full of very intricate, colourful characters that really take you on an interesting journey. The lead is actually Michael Smiley, who I really love in a lot of films. There's a lot of gangster elements to it, very witty, dry humour, and I was actually lucky enough to see this when it was during its post-production a couple of years ago, and it's nice to see the film coming into its completion and having its world premiere at Glasgow. So check it out when it is available, which could be quite soon rather than later, but stay tuned for that. Next up is Creation Stories from director Nick Moran, who follows the story of the infamous music producer Alan McGee. He is basically the man who discovered Primal Scream Oasis, and this is a story of his life and how he kind of molded the Britpop movement, and is actually starring Ewan Bremner from Trainspotting fame, of course, playing the title role. To be honest with you, this was a film that grabbed me by the nostalgia because it actually plays music from this time. It was a time I grew up in and it was very refreshing in its ways. It's actually going to be available on Sky Cinema, which is going to be quite soonish rather than later. But it is one of those films that isn't exactly perfect, but if you just want something to just relax and remember the good old days, Creation Stories is a film for you. Next up, I have Back to the Wharf from Li Zhaofang. This was a Chinese film that I found to be quite gripping in moments, and it never really kept that consistency within the narrative. It follows the story of a man who's wanted for homicide, and then he comes back 15 years later. It's basically showing his kind of rehabilitation into society and how the stigmatism follows around him. It is beautifully photographed, absolutely stunning cinematography that I was in awe of, but it just had a few flaws within its kind of cohesiveness, and it really just needed to elevate that narrative a little bit more. But honestly, it's worth a go if you're interested in Chinese cinema, especially new Chinese cinema, because it is slowly becoming something a lot more within the know. And I really am intrigued to see what Li Zhaofeng brings next to the table. Next up, we have Wildland from director Jeanette Nordal. This was her directorial debut, and it was an interesting story about trauma and grief and dealing with the issues within your past. It was very, very Danish within its kind of aesthetic and within its whole aura. It was a bit too cold for me, but I know some people will really enjoy this kind of Nordic kind of feel. It's actually going to be released by Picture House Entertainment in the UK later on in the year. There's a lot of buzz going around this film, but it wasn't quite there for me. Next up, we have Steelers, the First Gay Rugby Club from director Eamon Ashton Atkinson. This was actually a documentary about the very first gay rugby team in the world, and they are based in London, and it follows their story going into a tournament with other gay rugby teams, and it's just their journey. But what we focus on is on three main people and their connection to the team and to the sport. As a former rugby player, I really found this to be a very endearing film, and it just shows you the universal bounds of what this egg-shaped ball does to us. It connects us in so many ways, and it just shows that how sport at times can be your salvation from very harsh moments within your life. And I thought it was a very empowering film, and one of the better documentaries I actually saw at this festival. Next up is Cowboys from Anna Kerrigan, and this was a very interesting film that follows the story of a father who takes his transgender son away from his mother because she's trying to change him for the worst. And it is a beautiful journey, a very interesting kind of connection of family parenthood, and it is beautiful to look at. It takes you through the mountains. There is a very nice western score to it. Very refreshing film, and honestly I would recommend it highly. Next up is the Capo from director Shim Jang-yang. This was a South Korean film that I thought to be quite lovely. It was an interesting kind of discovery of music within South Korea and the ways that younger people are trying to make names for themselves through music. It was a very compelling story. I loved this kind of coming of age tale of friendship, of bonds of art. It's very nice music in it. Honestly, it was just lovely. I really had a lot of fun with it. Next up is the new documentary about the life of Tina Turner called Tina. This was actually a lot tougher of a watch than I thought, and it really just shows about the domestic abuse that she suffered at the hands of her former husband, and basically her rise and then her fall and then her rise again. I thought it was very compelling. I think anybody who's a fan of music or a fan of Tina Turner is going to love this. This is actually coming out in March, I believe, on Sky Cinema. Generally, I don't really have much to complain about it. I found it to be a very interesting, informative documentary that had a lot to say, and again, if you're a Tina Turner fan, you're going to like it. Next up is Voice of Silence from director Hong Wei-jung. And this was another South Korean film that really was interesting, very dramatic. Not exactly your usual kind of story, but it's oddly peculiar. It's a kidnap tale. There are very odd, light-hearted moments, very twisted at times. It's kind of imbalanced, but it's just one of those cool journeys that I just really went on, and I hope it actually gets a bit of a wider release because it'll be interesting to see what other people think of it. The next one I'm going to talk about is The Man Standing Next from director Woo Min-ho, and it stars Lee Byung-hun. This was a film that follows the story of the build-up to the assassination of President Park and the whole shift of power that happened in Korea. And to be honest with you, I found it to be a little bit too safe for what it was, because I found this could have been a very gripping political thriller that it was, but I just, for some reason, I expected something a little bit more, but I really loved the way that this film was shot. I thought Lee Byung-hun's performance was very, very good. I really dug it, and I found it very interesting and quite gripping, but I wanted that extra bite from it. But it is actually going to be widely available by now because of the Oscars. It is the official South Korean Oscar entry this year, so check it out if you can. Next up is Gunda from director Viktor Kozakovsky. This was a documentary about pig, cow, some chickens, black and white. There's no music, there's no there's no lines in it. It's basically a very warm story about farm animals. It's actually produced by Joaquin Phoenix, and I guess it's to help you understand more about that animals have feelings and we shouldn't really eat them. That's kind of one of the main messages, I guess. But it was very lovely, very endearing, and I've not been this moved by a pig since Bay Pig in the City, so check out Gunda when you can. Next up is Surge from director Anil Karia. This actually stars Ben Whishaw, and this was very interesting because it borderlines on the Joker narrative, but this was a lot grittier and very unhinged at times. I think Ben Whishaw really digs his teeth into this performance, and it follows the story of a man who has real no ambitions in life. He works at the airport, pats people down, and one minute he just loses it and starts robbing banks. It is very interesting. There's a lot to discuss, and I do hope that you add this to your watch lists as time goes by. Next up we have The Mauritanian, directed by Kevin MacDonald, starring Taha Rahim, who plays Mohamedou Ould Salid, who was a prisoner at Guantanamo Bay and was falsely imprisoned for many, many years. And this is his story of how he suffered at the hands of the American government through very tortuous scenes and eventually got his freedom. It actually stars also Jodie Foster, Benedict Cumberbatch, Shailene Woodley. This is one of the major awards contenders of this year. Taha Rahim is fantastic in it. I hope more people get to watch it. It's very shocking at times, I will warn you, but very compelling cinema. Next up, we have directorial debutee Susan Lindon's Spring Blossom. She is the daughter of a very famous French actor, Vincent Lindon, who I absolutely admire and love. She was actually 16 apparently when she wrote this screenplay, and it follows the story of her falling in love for the first time with an older man. It is a very fine line this film treads on, because of the age and consent, but it is a very compelling film that really looks into the eyes of somebody who is falling in love for the first time and not really understanding the boundaries of love, I guess. It is very touching, very interesting kind of debut film that I have a lot to admire, and I look forward to seeing what she has to make next. Next up, we have the Romanian LGBTQ plus film Poppyfield from director Eugene Iubilean. This was very difficult to watch at times because it is shocking that people that have such narrow minds still exist, but I found it to be a very eye-opening film about how life still is in some parts of the world, very similar to kind of the catharsis of And Then We Danced, the film from last year. But honestly, Poppyfield is playing at BFI Flair, I believe, next month, so get your tickets, give it a watch. It is very interesting filmmaking. Next up, we have Malaysian film Victims from Leila Juingji. This was actually very gripping and very difficult to watch at times, but it was an interesting kind of triad of performances that follow the life of young people, and really that kind of idea of being the outsider at times and the people around you that make your life a living hell. There are very difficult scenes in this film, but it's very gripping within its kind of whole idea, and honestly, I really hope more people get to see this film at some point. It was a very striking film, and there's a lot to discuss and divulge through. Next up, we have Murmur from director Heather Young. This was such a tough watch. It is such a sad film that follows the story of a woman who saves a lot of rescue animals, and basically her kind of way of dealing with the issues that she has and the losses that she has gained. Oh my god, it's so freaking sad, but it was beautiful filmmaking, very quiet, very cold directorial moves from her, but it was just something very special. And honestly, I hope more people get to see Murmur at some point, but beautiful filmmaking. Next up, we have Riders of Justice from Thomas Anders Jensen, who actually directed Men and Chicken, if you did not know, and it stars Mads Mikkelsen. This was a plethora of genre cinema that really was serious at times, very light-hearted, very witty, a lot of dark humour, very entertaining, great combination of characters. Mads Mikkelsen, again, is absolutely fantastic. It's amazing to see him in Another Round last year and seeing him in Riders of Justice now. I thought this was a lot of fun, and there's a lot to talk about, and check it out once it comes out this year. Next up, we have Dreams on Fire, which is a Japanese film from a Canadian filmmaker called Philip McKee, and it stars a very famous Japanese dancer, Bami Naka. This is basically Star is Born, but with dance. It was very vibrant, very well crafted. It just tells you the journey of her trying to become a very famous, well-known dancer. The dance sequences are very hypnotic, very energetic, very hyper-stylized. It is a very cool journey that I really liked, and it was pulsatingly good. Not as good as Emma maybe, but it's kind of in that realm if you kind of like Pablo Larraín films, but for a Canadian making a Japanese film, very, very good. Next up, we have Sir Alex Ferguson, Never Give In, directed by his son Jason Ferguson. I am a massive Manchester United fan, and this is no bias whatsoever, because this was an absolutely touching documentary that looks at the life of a legend, but also a man that suffered a brain hemorrhage a couple of years ago, and he was scared to lose all these magical memories that he's created between the pitch and in his family life with his wife. And it was very sad at times to really understand Alex Ferguson, because the thing, he's a very stoic manager, very aggressive manager, but he has one of the kindest hearts within the community of football and within the people that know him. And it is a great balance that this documentary has, and I would recommend you to watch it in May when it drops on Amazon Prime. Next up, we have Sweetheart from directorial debut Mally Morrison, which is a wonderful coming-of-age film that is set on a caravan site in Britain, because we all love a good caravan holiday over here, and it is a wondrous film of discovery that follows the story of AJ, who's played by Nell Barlow, and it's her coming to find love for the very first time, and it is a wondrous LGBT film that I have fucking loved. I thought it was absolutely fantastic, light-hearted, a lot of great humour, just it was just fantastic. It just didn't really sugarcoat anything, and I just loved it. It was so good. It is going to be playing at BFI Flair, so tickets will be available in March, so check it out if you can. Next up, we have Gagarine, which is directed by Fanny Lietard and also Rémi Trouille, and this was a fantastic French film set in a kind of tower block area, and it just follows the story of the young people living around it, and basically it's a sense of escapism, very beautiful filmmaking that I truly love. This is actually going to be available from Curzon in a couple of months. I don't really want to talk too much about it because I really want to make a proper video review for it at some point, so keep Gagarine on your lists. Next up, we have Springtide from Yang Lina. This was a Chinese film that was fucking amazing. So cold, very quiet film, but it follows three generations and how they kind of clash with each other, and just the way that the sense of identity is changing within Chinese culture. It was absolutely astounding. I'm surprised not many people have talked about this film. It's been out since 2019, and it's just one of these festival films that's just kind of like avoided everyone, but I will make a full video review about this one very soon. But keep Springtide on your lists. Is something quite good. Next up, we have Iranian film There Is No Evil by Mohammad Rasulov. This was the Golden Bear winner at the Berlinale in 2020, and I have been dying to see this film for quite some time. This was one of the most harrowing films I have seen in a very long time, and it really reinstates me how important Iranian cinema is in the modern world. It is a interesting journey of being a prisoner and basically being free at the end, and I think this is the whole statement of There Is No Evil. We go from these very constricted kind of ideas, and then we go to the wider world. It is absolutely horrible. It is horrible what has happened to the director of this film, who has been imprisoned for his artistic liberties. This is one of the best films I've seen this year, and I really cannot wait to drop a full video review for this eventually once it comes out in the UK very soon, so make sure There Is No Evil is on your lists. Next up, and it has been reviewed on this channel already, but is Our Midnight from Lim Jong-un. This was the most astounding South Korean film I have seen in this whole festival. I loved it. There will be a link somewhere here for you to check it out, but if you want a full detailed discussion there, go check it out. But I absolutely loved Our Midnight. And last but not least, I would like to recommend to you Jumbo from Zoe Witzog starring Nomi Melon. I think this was the best film I saw at this festival by not a country mile, but it was very tight between this, Our Midnight, and There Is No Evil, and also Springtide. It's very joyful, I would say, but Jumbo was the one that really grabbed my eye. And it is one of the best kind of like coming of age films. Well, it's not really coming of age either, but it was just finding your identity, understanding who you are, and falling in love with an animate object, which is, you know, not exactly the easiest kind of cinema to divulge and make it into an interesting and compelling watch. So those are all the films I watched at Glasgow Film Festival. I hope some of them have kind of like caught your eye now, and you're hopefully going to watch them at some point when they're going to be available, and some of them will be available at other online film festivals. If you have ever any questions about the releases or anything like that, always ask questions in the comment section below, because I will answer them. I will get back to you as soon as I can, or once I actually get the information from PRs and distributors, because I do want to help you guys out too. And I will do the same once I finish my Berlin Film Festival experience, and the same with South by Southwest. Obviously, you might think as well with Glasgow that I didn't talk about Minari, Black Bear, Apples, and First Cow. I'd seen all of them last year, and I ranked them in my last year's end of year list, so that I didn't see the point watching them again. I watched a lot of great films here, very diverse, a lot of international films that I really liked, and I can't wait to discuss some of them a little bit further as we go along. So I hope you guys are doing well. There's a lot more content on the channel to come. I don't really know what else is coming up next review wise or anything like that, but just stay tuned, like, share, subscribe, do as you please. And as we normally say on this channel, Deo danke, obrigado, merci beaucoup, arigato, dankeschön, bitteschön, all the shuns, and obviously never change. Add these films to your watch list, do it. You're gonna thank me, hopefully. Take care. Bye.